Life in Letters.
The presenting sponsor of My Life in Letters is sprayplanet.com. This is where you go to get everything MTN colors, be it 94, hardcore, whatever it is, go check them out. They're also the distributor of Crink products, Posca markers, and Grog inks. So go check out sprayplanet.com right now, order something, and go make your mark. But without further ado, let's get into this next episode. My Life in Letters, we are back again. Thank you for listening. On the phone right now, the man is on a cross-country drive. Topr, a.k.a. Wins from the infamous Lord's Crew, CBS, WST, CMA. Dude, Topr, man, great to have you on the phone. Thanks for doing it in bumper-to-bumper traffic in the middle of Tennessee, homie.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. And like, you know, I've known you like a long ass time. Like we didn't get to spend a lot of time together, but we were always around in the same city in the 90s, early 2000s. And so like you've been on the list of guys that I would want to get on the podcast and do an interview and just like learn like a little bit more about what makes the Topr tick. And so, we don't script here on this podcast. The only like same question I ask people is to get it going is if you have some kind of memory or experience with lettering or writing that you can talk about, like cite as like, oh yeah, that got me interested in playing with letters. And you're like, dude, you're interesting case because you're a writer and an MC and you've done both well, which is kind of rare. You know, I can only think of a couple other dudes that did it well.
Yeah. I kind of pride myself on that.
Yeah, and you should, dude.
I mean, this era, no one really cares. But when I came up, like hip hop and graffiti were still pretty connected as well as punk rock.
Yep, completely. And so, but before we get to that, do you have that memory, that childhood memory, pre-graffiti possibly, about some kind of experience with lettering?
I didn't actually, which is kind of the strange thing about me because I guess it would be from rap albums and stuff like that, and looking at old rap albums. And when I was a kid, because I started rapping or trying to rap in 1988, and I started writing after, once I found more about hip hop, I was just like a little weirdo white kid in the suburbs. And I was like, oh, graffiti's part of hip hop. And I just started scribbling with I never had any natural artistic talent. I never really had a penchant for doing any kind of art. And that's kind of how I got into it, was completely from the toyiest place you could come from, besides seeing some graffiti on album covers and on hip hop albums and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I was actually talking to a friend recently because I was born in New York, on Long Island, New York. And I grew up on Fire Island when I was a really little kid. Whoa. And there's a bar there that my parents used to hang out. And I went there and visited on vacation just a few weeks ago. And I was hanging out in this bar. And I ended up hanging out there years later when I was older and stuff. But there is a wall there in the back of the bar that Bill Rock and Satch and these old school, New York guys painted in this bar. And I remember that wall in that bar when I was like sitting at that bar drinking soda as like, it's hot, like 2, 3, 4 years old, as early as the memory can be. So I would say that as far as a memory of something lettering or graffiti based, I'm sure that seeing that there,
no doubt, planted
some sort of seed, because that was definitely the first graffiti I ever saw.
And do you remember, like, for the what did the wall look like that you said Bill Rock and Satch did? Like, was it pieces? Was it tags? What did it look like?
Yeah, so it's like a brick foundation wall, cinder block wall in the back of this bar, and they painted a train on it, like a kind of a train thing with pieces on the train, and a couple of like kind of b-boyish characters on it.
Sick.
And the bill is like, I mean, still to this day, I wish people painted like that. Like it holds up,
And that wall is still there today in that bar? Untouched?
Yeah, I just sat right across from it drinking just 2 weeks ago. I actually got pics of it. I'll email them.
Yeah, please do share that. That's pretty cool, man. So at age 2, 3, you were seeing 4 years old and on Fire Island. And then when did you move to California?
I was about 6 years old when my family first drove cross country to California, and they bounced around a little bit, and I ended up, like in San Clemente and some other little towns, beach towns around, and then they ended up settling in Santa Cruz in Aptos in '89.
Okay. And so, but you had been in California for a couple of years before that, or when?
Yeah, I think I got there in second, third grade.
I like the irony, dude, that we're talking about the cross country drive you did when you were a little kid, and you're right now driving all your stuff from where were you living? Asheville, North Carolina.
Asheville, North Carolina.
And you're driving back to live in California. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So.
That's cool. And so, okay, so you end up, well, I want to go back to you writing lyrics in 1988, because it seems like if you were going to you're beginning to rap in 88, and you were a suburb kid, and were you in San Clemente in 88?
I think, yeah, when I first started writing my first raps I was in San Clemente.
Did you find that you had like a knack or like a talent for lyrics early on? Was it slow going?
I've always been able to write. It's like one of my earliest memories I have is like writing, like your first writing instruction in like grade school, in like third grade, and writing something and the teacher liking it. And I was such a problem kid in class. I had a lot of learning disabilities and whatnot that I just immediately, from the day I started trying to write things, I had somewhat of a knack for it. And so
that's interesting. And so, that's actually the answer to my first question, I think, right? Well, what was some like experience? And I think for you, it's that.
As far as words and writing and lettering, as far as just writing things down.
And then I can make so many connections in my own experience with that, to now crafting letters daily. Like it goes back to that.
I definitely think there's a connection there. I always have.
Oh yeah. That's cool to hear. And so, so then talk about that. When you started writing your lyrics, were they just like terrible, or were they okay?
They were awful. Okay. You got to think 88, and I was always a few years back with everything, because a lot of the older kids I grew up with in New York were into hip hop. So I actually got into rap music when we were driving cross country in, my dad's green, I don't even remember what it was, some sort of early SUV sort of thing.
Okay.
With a pop-up trailer in the back. He was like siphoning gas to get us across the country and stuff.
Shit. Wow. And you were hearing what kind of hip, and was that 87?
And I was sitting in the back facing outward, and I had Run DMC and stuff like that, in my headphones, listening to, specifically like my favorite earlier stuff was, LL Cool J's first two albums, the early Run DMC stuff, Public Enemy. The first tape I ever stole was the first thing I ever stole was Public Enemy's first album.
That's pretty bold, dude. You weren't stealing Jolly Ranchers from the 7-Eleven like the rest of us?
No, I never ate. I think actually the first thing I ever stole was probably a candy bar. From a little store, and then there was a place there, and I didn't have. When my family first moved to California, there was no money. Like my dad was siphoning gas. He was going out there because my mom had family out there, and he was trying to go out there and make his way because things were slowing down in New York for him.
Okay.
It was like kind of early 80s when there was still kind of a recession going on.
Yep.
So that's why I went out there. And
so you got stuck off that. You were like listening to it on that cross country drive, and then you started writing your own in 88. Oh, but also you had said that you made a connection directly that hip hop or rap music or hip hop had this graffiti thing that was associated with it, and you would see it on album covers, and you had seen the one at the wall at the Fire Island bar.
Right.
When you get to California, what's your earliest kind of like memory or recollection of seeing any kind of graffiti like up?
Well, so I seeing it in school and stuff like that. I started my freshman year in high school, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was about 13, 14, 91, 92 in there. And one day, me and my buddy who lived down the street from me in Aptos, we just decided to start writing graffiti because it was a hip hop thing to do.
Okay.
And so, we got a couple cans from his little basement, and we just went down to the tracks and wrote. Now, at that time, the tracks in Aptos, there was actually a lot of graffiti there. At that time, H&R was already started, which was like some collage, Cancer, James, these guys. And then there, graffiti was really heavily linked to skateboard culture.
Yeah.
Like all the skaters were writers. So
maybe even surf culture too, right?
Yeah, and surf culture. But mostly it was like if you skateboarded in Santa Cruz in the early 90s, you were a tagger. They went hand in hand.
Of course.
And so
and a lot of people don't know about Santa Cruz, Aptos area. Like you just mentioned a few writers, but ton of writers came out of there. And I think it's an area that's slept on, and people think, oh, it's like a sleepy surfer town. And it's like, no, like dudes came out of there that like ended up crushing Frisco and way beyond, so shout out to that area.
Well, what's really interesting about the Santa Cruz area is because of the college there, you had always a constant influx of writers coming in from all these other places.
Yeah.
So when I started, Tempt was already doing stuff there, and he was influencing the kids, who were just a couple years older than me.
Sorry, did you say Tense or Tempt?
Tempt, T-E-M-P-T, Tempt from LA.
I didn't know he went to UC Santa Cruz.
He went to UCSC, and he killed it with throw-ups. I mean, like, my earlier top throw-ups were definitely influenced by him. Tropic, who started H&R, he moved there from LA. You had Heist and Raucus were living there in 89, 90, 91. They were there a bunch. Then you had...
Rest in peace, by the way.
Yeah. And then you had Co-Star and Fears and these guys who were influenced. Co-Star was from New York. He was from TC5 NCW. Cosm from New York. Yeah, Cosm, who was the first person I ever saw do, the bevel style that's popular now. That was kind of his style then.
Interesting, yeah.
And he was there, and he actually lived in Aptos. And so he would kick down tapes to this little kid that I used to kick it with, who would give me tapes. So like there was that connection all through there. And these years, like 88, you start writing lyrics up to now you're talking about 91, 92.
Had you been drawing letters on paper, or had you said you were tagging with skateboarding?
No, when I started in 91, I wrote, my first tag was comic, Komic. And it wasn't even comparable to there was no style to it. It was like, you come up with a tag. I didn't know the difference I didn't know there was like a cultural component to graffiti. I didn't know there was a style component that came from New York. I just thought, you just write on walls. I was a very naive kid.
Sure. Okay.
So, and I remember, writing on the chalkboard at school, and someone's like, oh, you write. And already there were kids in my school who had style. There was this kid, Brock, and this guy who went on to write Dams, who became a good friend of mine, who was an influence on me, and this guy, Tremors. They all went to my school. They were all kind of like the skater clique there.
What school was it that you guys went to?
Aptos High. So they started kind of putting me onto it a little bit, but I was such a toy and I was such a kook when I was a kid that they just like kind of, it's one of those kind of things where you kind of feed someone something so you can feel cool because you know it.
Yep.
But at the same time, like, this guy's a fucking kook. Like, there's no reason to really, you know what I mean? So, and that's kind of how it started. But, I lived right next to Aptos Tunnels, which was a piecing spot there. It was a series of 3 tunnels that went under this train trestle. And then down the tracks from my house, there was a big wall where the skater Corey Chrysler, rest in peace, he used to write Core, and then later on he wrote Slayer. So he had tags there and like throw-ups and stuff. I believe Heist or Raucus had stuff there. The H&R guys had stuff there. And there were tags all around. You could walk the train tracks for miles, and there were tags. All of the kids would just walk the train tracks and catch streaker tags. So that was in that little microcosm there is where I really started seeing my first tags. And that's where, I started getting my style from.
Yeah. And, it's interesting too. Like I started in 92 and just having done the Reno's interview, a guy who started much earlier than us. And there just wasn't all the stuff. And by the time we started, there were like streakers, right? Like that's like kind of a sophisticated tool, but that was just like put at us because it was 91, 92. Like everybody had ultras and fat caps, and like we had the kind of the luxury of being in like probably like a fourth wave of Bay Area graffiti, and it was like a luxury, you know, because you could just be given all this stuff. And it sounds like you had access to, which is nice.
Also, by that time there was also like style, like regional style, because you're talking about like 85, 86, 84.
Yeah, it was still developing.
I mean, there was it wasn't as defined, you know, like Doug was doing his version of funk, which was basically like a New York style from, you know, 3 years before or something like, or even from the late, you know, 70s or something.
Yeah, and then there was like new wave stuff. Yep, exactly.
It was slowly developing, but it wasn't. There was no definition to it. It's like, you know, with the Quake interview, you said he was just trying to. No one did it before, so you had to fucking figure it out. We at least had the leg up where even Santa Cruz, as small of a town that it already had its own regional style.
Yeah, totally.
Because people were doing font styles, like that was H&R's big thing, was like doing concepts and font styles. So that was already, as far as the piecing, was already kind of established there.
Right.
And Santa Cruz had a big influence from San Jose, which eventually was what my link into the Bay Area scene from was Lords. But starting out, it was mostly H&R, and then BU, which eventually became TBK, which was Corey Chrysler's crew, which was a bunch of like kind of white boy cholo skater fucking you know, kind of gangster dudes who were very LA influenced. So and then you had guys like Sum and those guys who were equally influenced from TMF and from AWR. So all those styles kind of came together in Santa Cruz.
Yeah, it's really interesting too to think of it that way, like how many different regions kind of all settled there in Santa Cruz area.
And it all homogenized and became one style.
Yeah, which is cool. Which is really cool. Style. And actually, I wish I could like visualize that right now to just see all those regions pulled together into that Santa Cruz thing. But then, and you're writing comic. I'm just curious about that. Like, you said there was no style, but how did you choose that name? I mean, you're a funny dude. Did people tell you were?
I like comic books, and I've always liked stand-up comedy. I've always been a big comedy fan.
Dude, you should do stand-up comedy, homie. I would laugh at you. Oh, you have? Oh, okay, good.
I've done some stand-up.
Good.
But in general, I mean, you know, I was one of those typical toys from that era who, like, I changed my name. I mean, it was comic for like a week.
Yeah.
You know, and then it was, or, you know, once those guys told me, oh, what you're doing is toy. You know, I mean, I can remember the entire progression. With comic, I wrote prank for a while after that. When I really started bombing, I started writing angles, and it just progressed from there. But it was one of those kind of things where I was changing my tag every 2-3 weeks.
Also, you said that someone was telling you were toy. Was that H&R guy? Who was talking to you?
That was, at the time, the guys in my school who wrote was the guy
Prox.
who eventually, Prox a little bit. He was the first guy who pointed out, like, oh, you write. But there was a crew called OTB from Watsonville. So at this time, a lot of kids were getting bussed up from Watsonville, which had a lot of gang influence. That's like, you know, Watsonville's like super Mexican town, a lot of Norteño gangster shit going on there. So those were like the Watsonville riders were the OTB guys. And those guys would drive to school with like airbrush jackets. You know, they were all fixing up, you know, bugs. And, you know, they'd have like OTB pieces on the side of their bugs, and that's what they would drive to school and shit like that.
Okay. Okay. And so you were friendly with those guys as well?
A little bit, but it was mostly my guys were the skater guys who were this guy who went on to write Dams. I don't even remember what he wrote then. I think it was Crush or Crusade or something like that.
And you said the dude, the homie Tremors as well.
And then Tremors was a big influence because he moved there from somewhere else, and he was kind of like the guy everyone looked up to at my school. Now later on, all those guys looked up to all the dudes who eventually became, you know, H&R and CMA. So, you know. So really, I was like so toy. I was looking up to toys who were looking up to, you know what I mean? That kind of progression.
Yep, absolutely. And how long did any name stick early on? Like you said, it was comic and prank and angles. Did anything stick for longer than a couple weeks in that 91, 92 era?
Not
Okay.
then. It was around 93 is when I started getting style because I left home really early. I ran away from home and I was a runaway.
Hmm.
And I left home about 14, 15, right in there,
Hmm.
like right at the beginning of my sophomore year. So I wasn't even in high school that long. That was just my freshman year.
Wow. Okay.
So the first name that really stuck was Angles, and I wrote that at the end of my freshman year. So, there was a kid at school who would just drive me around. I'd go do fat cap tags and just around Aptos. And that's when I kind of started actually bombing. And the difference between me and a lot of the guys at my school is they were all into graffiti, but they were all kind of black book toys. They were all scared to get caught and they didn't bomb. And so right off the bat, I wanted to bomb. That's what it's about.
Also,
So
like my memory of
what I'm gonna
Aptos,
do.
I mean, I have like I spent a decent amount of time in Santa Cruz and had some family who lived in Aptos for a while. And I'm trying to just like use my brain to remember like what it could be like to be bombing in Aptos. Like I can you tell us a little bit? Because I would think it's just like impossible because it's so small, but maybe that worked to your advantage. What was it like trying to bomb
People were
streets in
bombing
93?
freeways because California graffiti in the early 90s was all influenced from LA writing, which was basically freeway bombing. So that's the heavens there. That's when everyone was painting heavens, doing that stuff.
Okay.
So I was climbing on trestles and tagging. There was like a golf course by my house. I went up there. Oh, Vibes. That was the other tag I wrote for a while.
What was it?
When I first started bombing. Vibes. VIB.
Oh,
like
good tag.
check the vibe, y'all.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I was writing Vibes and then Angles. But that's what I was writing when I was bombing there. But it's a suburb. I mean, you're tagging on the side of fucking 7-Elevens and shit. It's not like you're really bombing. But at the time when no one in your school is bombing, and then you go and tag the wall that goes up to your high school when no one's done it, like when you're that age, you kind of feel like the shit for doing that.
Yeah, of course.
But really, where it all started is when I left home. I left home. I ran away when I was 14 or 15. And that's when, so another big influence on the Santa Cruz graffiti scene in general and why it flourished the way it was there is one component is the college and the influx of people going there from everywhere and the San Francisco, New York, and LA influence.
Right.
The other component was the entire town was decimated by the 89 quake.
True. Mm-hmm.
So you had the entire downtown was being rebuilt all through my early graffiti career in the early 90s. So there were, buildings that were, being torn down.
Yeah,
and
which created a pit scene, I'm guessing. Mm-hmm.
And and all sorts of stuff around those kind of things. And then in graffiti in Santa Cruz, you have a creek that runs through the length of the entire town that has bridges. Mm-hmm. So the bridges were the piecing spots.
Underneath
and every bridge had tons of pieces or the tunnel system. Mm-hmm. So
so that was how you were kind of bombing, as it were, back then.
Yeah, I mean you look at those, and so when I was homeless, I was homeless in downtown Santa Cruz, and I just started. I wasn't in school; I was a dropout, so I just started tagging full on, nonstop. All I did was fucking catch day tags, night tags, and just bomb. And
dude, and I just got to touch on that for a second because it just like we can't gloss over much that you were like on the streets as a teenage kid, 14 years old. Like that had to be pretty disturbing, pretty rough.
Yeah, I mean bear in mind I was pretty much homeless from the time I was 15 on and off, until I was fucking 26 or something like that.
Really?
So
shit!
I was always sleeping on people's couches.
Well, okay,
that was
and I guess
pretty much how I grew up.
So, like all the years that I knew you in the '90s in SF, that was you were hopping.
I was couch hopping the entire time, or squatting, one or the other.
That's a long run to do that for, man. Wow.
I mean, on and off. Like I went to college for a little bit of it, and had an apartment in Berkeley, and that's why I was bombing Berkeley a lot. And but that's why I, really the whole story basically is that, I was writing Cypher and living and basically sleeping on the couches of people who, UCSC students and stuff like that. They were pretty open to it because everyone's just leaving home and, and I was a pretty affable kid even when I was young.
Well, there's also like an interesting part of the culture out there. Like I remember I did a bike tour once and we biked through Santa Cruz, obviously on our way down south to like LA. And there was this entire community of like yurts in the woods on the campus of UC SC. And like they were students that were living there illegally, but it was kind of known and they were like fully enrolled students. Like I thought it was amazing, dude. So there's already like down there like a bit of a culture to support being outside all the time.
There's that, but there's also a weird component with growing up in Santa Cruz where it definitely has that surf culture where it's like
beach bum style, yeah.
Well, there's that, but it's also locals only. And like, like slugs, like a slug, because that's the banana slug is the mascot of UCSC. And like these fucking slugs, it was a derogatory term. We didn't like the college kids. I was lucky because I kind of advanced with my hand style a lot faster than a lot of kids, and I was bombing. So I really hooked up with older writers, guys like Peace, Trust, all those CMA guys, Twerk, Mesmer. They all took me under their wing, and I really was living. This guy Como, who passed away, rest in peace. Busy, a lot of those guys. They all kind of took me under their wing as like the little homie, and so I was really living with those guys and their friends who were already all out of high school, and they were really the guys who were putting me on a lot.
And so you were saying that like locals only kind of vibe, it supported you.
Yes, to a certain degree. And I stayed at college students' houses too, but that's a big component of the whole Santa Cruz attitude. Like I'm FTL crew. I mean, there's a reason why FTL is the most fuck you crew in fucking California who will fucking paint over everybody. It's the way we grew up. We just, it's us and against them kind of thing. Like fuck all of you. And that's kind of a lot of a component of the way the grass team was there.
Yeah.
And you got to realize, I also joined Lords when I was 15, 14.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah. I mean, I was on the streets for about 6 months by the time, maybe 8 months by the time I met Lords.
And did you say that happened through San Jose connections?
Yeah. So I used to go to a lot of raves back then to sleep because they were all-night parties.
Oh, my gosh.
And I knew the people who threw them.
So
so
you're the first person to ever tell me that. I went to raves to sleep. That's wild.
Yeah, and I'd just crash out in the corner of the rave or something like that.
Yeah.
And I hooked up once with a real hot chick from there who was super out of my league, like an older girl. She was like 18 or 19.
Nice.
And she knew all the Lords dudes in San Jose, and they were all popping at her. So she's like, "Oh, you should meet this guy I met, Topr." So I came to San Jose to stay with her a little bit and hook up with her, and she introduced me to the San Jose Lords. And those guys were like, "How is this fucking weirdo 15-year-old dude
got game,
hooking up with this super hot fucking 19-year-old girl that we all popped at and none of us could ever pull?"
Nice.
Like, what the fuck is up with him? And they kind of, we all went to San Francisco once and bombed and hung out, and then they took me under their wing. So I was hitchhiking to San Jose a lot and staying at their house because the Lords had a little, they had a house in San Jose downtown. It was Debate from Lords. I forgot who else lived there. I think it was Debate, Zyke, and Peanut Butter Wolf actually all had a house together in San Jose. So I would drop acid downtown, homeless, hitchhike to San Jose, and fucking show up all spun out on acid and hang out with those guys. And they thought I was like a mascot. They were like, this guy's like an anomaly. I was because at that time, that was before a lot of the white boy kind of Lords, punk rock Lords influence. It was all cholo gangbang when I fucking would hang out with Lords. And so I was almost like a mascot.
Well, and we skimmed over how you got to Topr because last we heard you were writing Angles and bombing Aptos. When you're on the streets, 14, 15, is that when you found Topr? And how, if so, how'd that come up?
So I was writing Cypher.
Right.
And I found out there was a cipher from TMF in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I did not, back then that sort of thing was a lot more frowned upon than it is now, having the same name as someone, even if it was, back then San Francisco was so far away from Santa Cruz, but it still kind of rubs me the wrong way when people have the name of an established writer. It's just like, to me, it's a toy thing to do. Yeah. That's why you changed your name so much when you're young. You're trying to find your name.
True. Yeah.
Right. And so I was actually hanging out with Kiefer at this little kind of like drug front cafe that we used to hang out at in Santa Cruz. And I'd already been hanging out with Lords because when we went to San Francisco that time, I wrote Cypher, but I wasn't in Lords yet. And we were fucking doing acid and hanging out at this cafe, sketching on napkins. And somehow I got in my head, like, wouldn't it be funny if, like, you wrote Top Ramen on a... Because at the same time, I was staying at college kids' houses all the time. And the only thing a college kid has to give someone to eat who's, like, starving is Top Ramen.
Nice,
so I was sustaining... solely on fucking Top Ramen. And so, I thought, how funny would it be if, like, you caught, like, some, like, depressed college kid sees, like, all he has is Top Ramen and he's fucking, like, can't deal with it. And he's walking home and he sees a Top Ramen tag and it's the thing that fucking pushes him over the edge and makes him fucking kill himself.
Oh, shit.
And I was on fucking acid, so that whole idea to me was hysterical. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's so funny. I was like, fuck it, I'm going to start writing Top Ramen. And I started bombing the shit out of it.
Yeah, you did.
Really hard.
I remember. And so that was 90.
And that's how it started.
Is that 93 when you were 14?
That was 93, maybe 94 by that time when I started writing.
Okay, so you're writing Top Ramen, you're living on the streets, you have all these connections in Aptos, Santa Cruz, and then you meet the Lords. And like you were talking about, like being like a mascot and just kind of this anomaly. And then you said you went up to the Bay, up to Frisco and went bombing. Is that when they put you down with Lords?
No, I think they put me down because I was still writing Cypher at that time. We went there, went to Haight Street, bombed up and down it. Kind of like, when you're from out of town and you're a toy and you go to San Francisco and you go to Haight Street, you think you're the shit for like catching fucking tags. But a couple times I'd visit them at this Lord's house they had, and I'd already been writing Topr. And I used to write Topr Loves Asian Girls as a full tag, before I realized how problematic that was. On some fucking white boy from the suburbs, racial fetishist bullshit. But they all thought that was funny. And then the rapping component too, because by that time I was really good at rapping. I could fucking freestyle my ass off.
And all these years from 88 until 94, you continued to write bars. You were always writing lyrics.
Well, I was always writing, but by 93, I got really into freestyle.
Yep.
And battle. And that was my thing more than writing. Like, I wrote a lot, and that's why, and you pepper your writtens into your freestyles or whatever. Yeah. But at that time, it's like when you're a homeless kid, I would just sit in a fucking park and just freestyle to myself for hours, straight. Wow. And that's kind of like how I got really good. And then, when I started hanging out with the Lords, they lived with Peanut Butter Wolf. Yeah. So every single weekend, DJs would come over. It would be a fucking hip hop house party every weekend.
And you're with like a, soon to be legend. I mean, he was already like pretty well known at that time, and then he just blew up.
Yeah, by that time he already had the stuff with Charisma.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was right around when Charisma died.
Yeah, and that was big. That went global. So
he was a real big influence on me. And then and also I think he had that 6-song or 8-song EP on Southpaw, which was, it had like a Charisma song, some sub-content stuff. I think
Anticon? Anticon on that too, maybe?
No, Anticon
was later.
On that. Okay. But Encore's first song on there. I think maybe Rasco had a song on that.
There was someone else too that I'm trying to remember. But I remember that EP. It was dope. That thing was
Persevere
fire.
had a song on it.
It was Persevere,
like a San Jose rapper at that time. And I was hanging out with all those guys, so I was getting really influenced. Yeah. And then, so remember I told you it was my buddies my buddy neighbor, who we got the paint out of his basement. We went scribbling down the road, down the tracks. He ended up eventually writing Jesus, Gezes, which you may remember from early 90s San Francisco.
Can't say I do, but there was just so much. Okay, so he's Jesus.
So he moved to Marin. His mom was like this hot, younger mom, and they were like this destitute family. And she was like a hippie new age person, and she met some fucking loaded motherfucker who lived in Tiburon, which is the richest place you can live in the Bay.
Pretty much.
It's in Marin County.
Yeah.
So I started going to Marin County and bombing with him, and we'd hang out. So when I got into Lourdes and I'm hanging out at the Lourdes house, well, then they'd have Lourdes meetings every weekend. So it was always a big deal when the San Francisco guys would come down.
Yeah.
So Defy and Quake and Worm came to one of these parties once, and Defy had just gone on Lourdes the week before this party. I think. So I think Quake brought him there to kind of like show off his new, the new young guy that he put on Lourdes.
Okay.
And I had already been on Lourdes for a couple months by then.
Oh, and who put you down? Who from San Jose did that?
Debate and Zyke.
Okay.
Zyke actually is the person who officially put me down.
Okay. And how did that go, by the way? Was it just like right Lords, or what's the initiation for Lords back then?
I mean, I think it was a little bit different for me, but I was hanging out with them pretty tough at that time. Like I was hanging out with them all the time. And the other thing is I back then I boosted a lot. Like everywhere I went, I was constantly boosting shit.
Sure.
And Zyke is a fucking monster at boosting, especially back then. Okay. And that dude, he's like an enormous, scary, tough dude. So we would go into liquor stores together, and he would just fucking sit there and mean mug them while I put whatever I want to in my fucking pocket. And it's the 90s, so back then I was super skinny. I was like skin and bones. And you're wearing size 44 fucking pants and shit. You can fit fucking half the goddamn store in your fucking belt, And so he always got a kick on, like, I was down to bomb. And at that time, Lourdes had bombers, but there was also a party crew aspect to it, which is kind of party crews don't really exist anymore. But it was a very Latin kind of freestyle, not freestyle rap, but freestyle music culture, which would be these party crews that were almost like kind of, not really gangs, but they were just crews. They'd all wear, kind of like pretty boy crews that would all wear the same jackets, and it'd be like the Playboys or something like that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so Lourdes kind of had a little bit of aspect of that. So all of a sudden they had this weird bathrobe wearing, crazy fucking half punk, half rap kind of, acid casualty kid from Santa Cruz coming up and fucking who would bomb, who would rack, and they got a fucking kick out of it, and that's kind of how I got put down. But then, so I remember how big of a deal it was. Like, people were talking about for days, like, Quake is coming. And they had this big meeting where it was all the different chapters at the time would all come down to the Lourdes house and party and drink and fuck girls and have meeting. And back then, sketchbooks were still a big thing. And Lourdes kind of had a very unique sketchbook that they were collage based. So all the sketchbooks would have these collages in them.
Oh, that's sick.
And Lourdes was also a very different crew for what the crews were around, because there was a hip hop aspect to it. But there was also like mods and goths. A lot of those Latin dudes were super into,
Morrissey and
New Order and Morrissey and all that, which has always been kind of in anyone who hangs out with Latin people. There's always that kind of cultural contingent there.
Yeah, it's really
and they were really big on that.
Yeah.
And then you also had the gangbangers. So all those things kind of converged. This graffiti, mod, goth, gangbangers would all be hanging out together. So it was a very weird crew, and the chicks they hung out with were fucking bad, because they had these like hot kind of goth, Asian and goth Chola girls that were hanging out.
Yeah.
And
the post hair bears.
Yeah. And they had and they had these sketchbooks where every page would be a full collage.
And what would
I mean?
Describe one of those collages. What were they like? What were they collaging?
I mean, it would be the personality of the person who did it, so, but it would be just stuff out of magazines. So like Jack, who was a big influence on me from that era, he was, super goth, pale, kind of like had this cholo goth look. So his books would have all this kind of like gothic, iconography kind of, looking stuff mixed with his graffiti. And the cholo guys would be more kind of like car cultural, lowrider kind of looking stuff. And then a guy like me, my shit would be like cutouts of fucking noodles and fucking hip hop shit and all, you know what I mean? But you'd open that first page of the bigger black book, and that, that first page where it's the cardboard on the left and the first page would be a huge collage. We usually would have the guy's name and Lords all cut out from magazines, all collage. It was a very unique thing.
Dude, it sounds really fucking cool. Yeah.
And, if you ever get to see Quake, like he still has his books from back then.
Yeah.
And his were fucking really dope. And it was a big deal because Quake had a name and was doing stuff. So he came down with Defying Worm and those guys. And I was talking to him and I was like, "Oh, you're from Marin. I go to Marin all the time. Like, you ever heard of Tiburon?" And this guy's like, "Who the fuck is this weird ass kid who's hanging out with these dudes? And how the fuck does he know Marin?" And I was name dropping Sect and some of the MVK guys who were up in Marin at the time. He's like, "How does this guy know who these people are?" And it's because I was going up to Marin to visit Jesus all the time. So then I had the connection with the Lords from San Rafael. So then I started going up to the Bay to hang out with them and then go to the city to bomb. And that's how I started. That's how I that was the step I took where it's like, okay, I'm not based in Santa Cruz, San Jose anymore. Now I'm in San Francisco, Marin, Oakland. And that's how I started hanging out then. And back then in the Bay, it's not like it is now where people go all Bay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People don't, it was like Frisco writers bomb Frisco, San Jose writers bomb San Jose, Santa Cruz writers, sometimes would go up to San Francisco and bomb, but not really.
Yeah.
I mean, the East Bay was even sections of the East Bay, like Berkeley, Oakland was one thing, and then Cocoa County was another thing. No one went to all those places and bombed. And that was kind of my thing, is I was up in San Jose, I was up in the East Bay, I was up in San Francisco, and I was up in the North Bay.
Also,
and so
can I just ask, like your focus, was it, when you're saying bombing, was it mostly was it tags and throw-ups? Like
tags and throw-ups.
And and when you got into Lords, like that coupled with just your personality, coupled with that you were down to MC, coupled with you were probably funny and entertained them, that's how you got into Lords. It wasn't because your graph by itself was on some level.
Not at all.
It was a whole package thing for you to get into.
Yeah, I was such a character back then. I mean, I'm still such a character.
Yeah, you are.
But I mean, back then I was like I said, I was a weird kid and I could rap. And back then, like, that kind of held some cachet.
Oh, also you had that 19-year-old girl, which gave you a lot of cred automatically. Yeah.
Which, and I'm not saying that to act like I'm some kind of pimp or something. That shit was a fucking anomaly. And it was an anomaly that changed my life. But at the same time, when you're fucking homeless at 15, 16, which is the years we're getting into then, like you have to be a little bit more advanced for your age.
Sure.
And I was still reading, I'd go to libraries all day and fucking read books and stuff. So I was still I was a bright kid for my age. I had a unique perspective on things. I was funny and I was weird and I could rap hella good. So that kind of stuff people like, but I always had a decent hand, and especially for like having a 15-year-old guy in your crew who bombs that hard and can rap and shit like that. It was kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It was like a, not a gimmick, but that kind of thing. It was like a gimmicky thing.
Exactly. And and then also, I'm interested in like how you would balance things, like, because I'm sure balance was hard as a homeless kid, but like balancing writing lyrics versus going out bombing, were they all just daily operation for you?
24/7 back then. I mean, that's all it was. Like if I hung out with my friends who were skating, because everyone was skaters. Like you had Busy and Coma and those guys from CMA when I was in Santa Cruz. They would go to a skate spot and skate, and I would sit and I'd write rhymes.
Yeah.
And then if I was alone, which you spent a lot of time alone then, you'd catch, I'd catch tags and shit, walk around, catch tags and freestyle. I freestyle constantly to the point where like it was annoying as fuck. Like that's all I did. That's how I could communicate in rhyme form, and I'm not that good at freestyle anymore. But back then, I mean, by the time I was 17, 18, I was easily one of the best in California. And I'm not saying that on some bragging shit. That was kind of an accepted thing. Like,
Yeah. Definitely. And so then I'm also interested in, was it 96 you said you got up to like officially like you were in Frisco? Like that's kind of like where you were doing
90, the end of 94, 95 is when I started, when I was really in the Bay full time.
Which was like a fucking epic era of San Francisco graph, because that was sort of getting into be the heyday of when everybody just started going to San Francisco from all over the country, all over the world. I'm curious if you can just talk a little bit about your memories of the Frisco scene, 94, 95.
Well, that's another thing about, so I went from this melting pot of graffiti at a time that a lot of scenes didn't have a melting pot, and dropped right into another melting pot. Well, and here's another component of it too. So not only did I have those other styles in Santa Cruz, because I kind of want to go back to some of those early days a little bit more first. One of the guys who took me under their wing then was this guy Think from LA. And when I was a total toy, he hung out at this cafe that I hung out at. And that guy would sit down with me and actually show me stuff. And Cha from BA,
Mm-hmm.
he ended up coming through Santa Cruz doing some fucking Cha style dirt.
Nice.
And I met him when I was real young. He was young too. He was like 17 and I was like 15, 14. And he showed me a lot of East Coast styles. He's the first guy to ever show me Philly prints. Back when no one in California knew what the fuck a Philly print was. The internet wasn't there yet. Unless you've been there or met someone from there, you didn't know. So then, years later, okay, I'm dropped into this place where it's when Twist was at his height.
Yep.
It's when you had TMF, Doug and Dean were still incredibly active.
Yep.
And that's like some of my biggest influence stuff ever. TMF was crushing the city. And then you also had all those Rust Belt guys coming in, like Evade, Felon, Soap.
Yeah.
So you had this East Coast influence in, and then you had KR and his homies coming in from
that New York thing. Mm-hmm.
So then all of a sudden, San Francisco went from having this very kind of its own version of a New York style to this way more well-rounded style. And then you had all the iconography coming through from Twist influence. So
and I would argue
all that stuff started to mesh there.
I would argue that meshing has had, I think, maybe the one of the second biggest impacts on like all graffiti, like globally. I think New York, obviously 70s, 80s had this huge thing. And then San Francisco, mid 90s, that was it. There wasn't a better scene. I wasn't all over the world, but I can just like pretty much tell you from seeing it, there was no better scene than that right then. It was so pure. Right. It was so diverse and like, and
the reason amazing. Everyone was moving there is because from a graffiti perspective, it's the perfect city because it's a 5 square mile city. Yeah. It's barely fucking bigger than Manhattan, the entire city. So you can bike from one end to the other.
Yeah.
And then you started getting the Bike Messenger punk rock influence there.
Yeah.
So of course they go there. And it was post earthquake, pre fucking tech boom.
Yep.
So you had
lots of space.
And crime. I mean, San Francisco, when I moved there, was fucking grimy as shit.
Dude, hella grimy. And people still, to this day, I have New Yorkers be like, oh, San Francisco. Oh, I hear it's like really nice and clean. And I'm like, that city was so thug. It was so gangstered out in the 90s and still in parts today. And people don't know. People sleep on that. They think it's all sandals and shorts. And I'm like, no.
Well, like you talk to like the MSK guys or like Big Five. He always says, he's like, yeah, like when LA people say, oh, Frisco, it's soft. He's like, Frisco's fucking grimier than LA in a certain way.
For sure.
It has a fucking, it's not as hard in that hard LA, sharp way, but it's definitely like grimy in that fucking TL. People smoke crack in the middle of the street. The police drive by and they don't do shit.
Yep.
And so you could go to 850. You could either you had multiple options. The beat and release program was still fucking active.
Very active.
So if you could convince a fucking cop to beat you up, you were getting let go.
Yeah.
Half the time they didn't want to take you in because they knew you were going to get let go. And even if you did get taken in, you'd spend the weekend in 850, show up to your court date, and the charges would be dropped.
Yeah, and go out bombing that night,
Yeah. Then it's a cityscape in the way New York is. It's not all spread out like LA or like,
it's dense.
Texas or something like that. It's still dense.
Yeah.
It's on top of each other. So you can still climb and get climbing spots. And there's still, at that time, street spots weren't getting buffed. So every green box on every corner had a mop tag on. I mean, it was such a fucking crazy time to be there. And then there was an amazing piecing scene there because you had Psycho City, which people came from all over the world to paint. So you had a constant influx of style and of influence.
Yeah, and we had guys like Crayon in San Francisco, Dream in Oakland. I mean, there were kings, like legends in our city.
Like some of the best of the world.
Pretty much, exactly.
Yeah,
and so
Doug and TMF and those guys.
I mean, the names go on and on and on and on and on. And so, and dude, I'm really loving your description of it right now. It's really, you're bringing it to life, and it's really great to hear. It's taking me back.
I mean, you remember what it was like, and there was so many of us doing it. Yeah. And the other component, like when you talk to, so by this time I was I was homeless and doing stuff, but I was also kind of cool with my family again. So I was going out to New York and visiting family and hanging out with, in 96 is when I first hooked up with, Sace and those guys out in New York. So I was getting influence out there, and the difference between the San Francisco scene and the New York scene is everybody got along. That's
true.
Unheard of.
Yeah, right.
And so styles were constantly fucking being passed around because it wasn't, you didn't have, granted there were some beef between locals and outsiders and shit. And I moved there when I was so young, I was considered a local. So I was cool with like the 3F guys when the 3F US wars were going on and shit like that. But, for the most part, everybody got along, and people weren't so, look down their nose at toys and shit as well. So people were it was a very unique time because everyone was really cool. So people were getting put down. Gesso, during those early IHU LBK days, he was 15, 16. Gray moved out there. He must have been 18 or 19. So, younger guys were out there doing stuff and hooking up with older guys like KR, and those guys by that time were a lot older.
Yeah.
And getting put on and getting taught styles. That shit didn't happen in other places.
Yeah.
In other places, you'd be afraid if you ran to a writer and they found out you're a writer or he was a writer, it was probably going to be on site. Definitely in New York. Definitely in LA. LA is a fucking war zone and shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why a lot of those guys from LA started going up to the Bay because it was so laid back. And if you got caught, chances are you're going to get dropped. And the spots were great because you had the earthquake still. So you had pits and you had weird rooftops, and no one could afford to buff because the fucking, the tech boom didn't really start hitting there really until 96.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was it felt, maybe you can talk about this, but it felt like a free for all. It felt like just like I was a kid in a candy store out there. And I think a lot of people had that same experience. Like it was easy.
Honestly, in retrospect, I wish I did more big spots instead of just doing like a lot of tags and stuff, because I look back and I go, what the fuck was I so scared about? Because it was, dude, and every time I got arrested all the time, and it didn't fucking matter. No one gave a shit. And I was like, why the fuck was I so shook to go out and do bigger spots when, I used to rack so much paint and give it away because I just liked fucking pushing carts. And I didn't have a house, so I just give the paint away. Yeah. And I was like, why wasn't I fucking doing, granted, early 2000s is when I really was or late, from 99 to 2001, when I had the top throw up era there, it's when I was really crushing. But before then, I wish I was doing more straight letter spots. But you had guys like you, fucking IC. IC was doing fucking giant white and black things on the face of entire fucking buildings
Yeah,
and
dude,
shit
he was
on ground level.
Beaver was a beast. Yeah.
Not to mention the fucking the Muni aspect of it and all the Muning writing styles and shit.
Yeah. And you know, like what you talk about that 99 era where you were like really putting up fill-ins, but like what about like 97, 98? What was your emphasis? I mean, you're also just still surviving. You're on the streets, so you're probably looking for a bed.
So by that time, so in 96, I went out to New York and I worked for a while.
How long did you stay?
I went out to New York for the summer because where I live there on Fire Island, it's a summer vacation place.
Yeah.
So I went there in the summer of 96, and then afterward, my uncle invited me to go out to the Virgin Islands and go work construction with him out there. So I went out to the Virgin Islands and I lived there for about 6-8 months, something like that.
Okay.
And you couldn't bomb there. There was you couldn't paint there.
Yeah.
So when I got back, I really got juiced. And so that's 97,
okay.
End of 96, early 97.
Okay.
So that's the Tits Crew era when Tits Crew really started bombing the shit out of Frisco. And by that time, that's when the AWR guys were there, all the MSK guys. So that's the MSK era. And that's when Ty was there and those guys. And me and Ty were really close because Sight, people really write him out of history.
It's true, dude.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Sight, not only was he a crazy bomber, but Sight was, let's say Ty was Sight's ward. Like, yes, everyone has stories about going out bombing with Ty and how funny was to bomb with, but you know, everyone leaves out that guy had, you know, some mental issues and had difficulty taking care of himself.
Yeah. Because
he was so single-minded about painting that he wouldn't eat. He wouldn't, and so. And he couldn't work and he couldn't stay, so he lived with Sight. Sight took care of him like a fucking father and shit. Sight is from Santa Cruz originally. I grew up with him, so you know I was real tight with Ty through him, and also it was a weird era because I kind of straddled because I hung out with a lot of local guys from there that I knew from hip hop and from graffiti, and I moved there young enough where everyone kind of thought of me as a local. You know, like a SF, you know, kind of more of a native than like a transplant. And there was during that era when everyone was beefing, you know, like the ICP MSK beef was going on. And I straddled both sides because I was cool with both those people. And by this time is when the rap thing really started kind of beginning to take off for me. Because by that time Maritime Hall was open, which was this giant music venue in San Francisco.
A lot of battles out front, a lot of
battles inside by the bathroom, and I was basically the house MC there. So basically the guy whose family not owned it but ran it, the guys who ran it, his son was a DJ, and that guy kind of pulled me off the street and gave me a job at Maritime Hall. And so I was rapping at Maritime Hall and I had the group with them, which was the Earthlings. And that's when I started doing, that's when I started doing shows where you're rocking, you know, if there was 4 hip hop shows there a month, I was opening up at every show, doing a freestyle or performing with my group. So that's when like the rap thing kind of started taking off for me.
Well, and actually, that seems like that whole era. That seems like a nice like shift because like you're taking your lyrics, you're rapping much more seriously because you're on like a serious venue, opening up for some bigger names, and
we
also,
were touring too. Like that's when you know Hyro noticed us. That's when Living Legends first started kind of coming up. So in hip hop in the Bay, like now people look down at like the independent backpacker rap shit as corny, but backpack rap music was the biggest thing in the world between 96 and 2002.
Yeah, and also to toot our own horn, the Bay Area was fucking killing it. Just mentioning just that Hyro and Living Legends, like people sleep on, well, they don't sleep on Hyro. Living Legends are slept on, I think. Those dudes were dope, very influential.
But they were also the biggest thing. I mean, in youth culture, they were a goddamn fucking Panda or whatever is going on now. You know, I mean, they were the fucking that was the youth culture music of choice.
Yeah.
So everyone was into that. Yeah. And so music venues around the country would not book rap, reggae, metal, or punk because of insurance issues with shows going south in the late 80s. Right? So what this guy did, which was really genius, is he booked all that stuff and never had a problem. So all of a sudden, these bands that were like huge reggae bands that would only play, reggae clubs for 300 people at the most, all of a sudden had a platform where they could play in front of 2,000, 3,000 people. Yeah. So everyone played there. So in the 90s, if there was a hip hop act that was big, they played there. And if they played there, I fucking opened up and freestyle. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth, was there.
And check it, what I wanted to say was that like 99, you talk about this like big era of you doing throwies and like really going at it. And I remember you just, even 98, I feel like 98, you were just like shit was on Smash. Like you couldn't go anywhere without seeing a Topr tag.
That's when I was tagging a lot, was 97, 98, 2000. So I started going to college in the East Bay, and I moved to the East Bay. And so I was working at Maritime Hall, I was touring, and I was bombing the East Bay with Dutt and HSO and all those guys. Those guys were my partners.
Haven't heard that name in a long time.
And then bombing, and then I went back out to New York for a year, and I stayed on Fire Island, another thing where you can't bomb. So when I came back with $10,000 that I saved up. I got an apartment in the Mission. Coma from CMA, who was one of my best friends, and a guy who put me on, he passed away, and I kind of had a nervous breakdown, and I just woke up every day. I got a fifth or a thing of fucking whiskey. I drank, and I just go bombing. I had just money stacked, and that's when I was doing all those top outlines every 5 feet, and Ty died, and that was a real big influence. Like, I want to bomb like Ty did. Yeah. And I started doing throw ups, fucking every 5 feet wherever you go in Frisco, fill-ins, outlines.
Yeah, dude. And like I said, dude, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing you. And I think, like that's our time. And like, I think it's actually an interesting place to pivot or for us to take a break. Because if you're willing, you'll come back and do a part 2 with us. We'll be able to do that 99 to now. And you told me before the interview that, writing Wins has been like this whole second, like this kind of rebirth for you. And I see it stylistically. Like I told you, dude, like I really love the direction. So, let's put that on record. You're going to come back and do a part 2 with us?
I would love to do, the PCF era of San Francisco.
So much more to talk about, man.
When the rap shit really took off, and and talk about the graph. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it, Adam. You do your thing. And
dude, you too, brother. And listen,
and I love the podcast. I'm honored to be on. Thank you.
Man, so happy to get you on. And also, just for people that don't know, where can people see your newest work? Like, I know you're on Instagram. What's the handle that you use?
It's Lord underscore Topr, TOPR. So it's LORD underscore TOPR.
Okay, so at Lord underscore Topr, at Lords or Lord, LORD?
Lord, LORD. Okay.
And then do you have a site, you have a Facebook page or a website for more work?
Not really. I just have my personal Facebook page.
What about your music? Where can we find some of that?
You can listen to all my albums are on most of my, depending on the label deal, a lot of them are on iTunes, but you can find my entire catalog on Bandcamp. It's Bandcamp/TOPR, or you can just search in Google Topr, TOPR, Bandcamp, and find it there.
Well, dude, like I was saying earlier, man, like part of one of the great things about doing this podcast is I get an excuse to like call up an old homie and like pick her brain about these things, man, these like crazy fucking things that we did. And we came out on the other side, like, maybe worse for the wear, but we're still here and we can talk about it, dude. And so, it's been an honor, dude, being able to hear your stories.
Thank you, man. And I really appreciate it.
Awesome, man. And listen, dude, drive safe on the road right now, and best of luck on the next chapter. And we'll talk soon.
Okay, man. Thank you. Peace.
My Life in Letters is looking to grow and expand our team. If you think you're right to collaborate and partner with us, please drop us a line at either mylifeinletterspodcast@gmail.com or send us a direct message at our Instagram page at mylifeinletterspodcast. My Life in Letters is recorded live in Bushwick, Brooklyn, USA. Our sponsor is sprayplanet.com. Our producer is Christopher Piccioni. Our videographer is Jordan Miller for Way Up Creative. Our intern intern is Jessica Magar. Our theme music is by Fonte, and my name is Adam Fujita. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Peace.
The language of letters.